On September 14, California Governor Gavin Newsom successfully fended against a recall challenge. In the end, 62% said no on the recall question. On question 2, the highest vote getter, garnering 48.4% of the vote, was my guest, Larry Elder. Larry, nice to have you back on the program.
Michael, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Listen, just to kind of rib you a little bit, I was going to introduce you as conservative radio host and Trump supporter Larry Elder, but I knew that would be a burr in your saddle.
Well, the last time you had me on was on your program on CNN, and you referred to me as, quote, Trump Republican, close quote, which in my opinion was extremely unfair because, as you know, what Gavin Newsom did to successfully fend off the recall election was not to defend his record on crime, which is bad, violent crime up dramatically in California, not defend his record on the way he shut down the schools and shut down small businesses. Nearly a third of all small businesses, by the way, are now gone forever. Many of them run by minorities. I only mentioned that their race because Gavin Newsom prides himself on his wokeness in caring about minorities. He's up there at the French Laundry restaurant, sitting up there with the very people that drafted the mandates, and he was not wearing masks, not engaging in social distancing. We have an acute homeless problem that's gotten worse under his supervision. California, by the way, Michael, is 6.5% Black. Did you know that 40% of the homeless population, according to a study by HUD, is Black? And people are leaving California for the very first time. And middle-class people and working-class people leave California. They cite the number one reason, the cost of a home, which right now is $800,000. And that is 150% above the national average. My point is, Gavin Newsom was able to fend off the recall election by bringing in people like Barack Obama and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, all of whom cut commercials. Not a single one of them uttered the following magical words: Gavin Newsom has done a good job for the people of California. They said it's being a takeover by Republicans, by Trump Republicans. They had a picture of me standing next to Donald Trump. And the LA Times, by the way, referred to me as, I'm quoting, the black face of white supremacy, close quote. That's how and why he won.
All right. Somewhere on my list of questions, I intended to ask you what's next for Larry Elder. I think I just got the answer. Like, you're still in the zone, right? You clearly want to take another shot at this.
Well, even when the polls show, for a while, by the way, they were showing that the recall versus anti-recall side was in a tie. Even when the polls showed that the majority of people no longer supported the recall, it also found the majority of people did not feel that he deserved another 4 years. And he's eligible to run again next year and has already indicated he's going to run. And by the way, Michael, you mentioned that I got 48.5% of the recall of the replacement votes, and you're right. I want to point out that in 2003, when Arnold Schwarzenegger ran, he got 48.5%. We got almost the identical percentage of votes for the replacement side, and the landscape was far more daunting for me. There are now 5% more registered Republicans than back in 2003. There were 50% more registered independents. And even the New York Times admitted that most registered independents in California vote Democrat. And there are 33% fewer registered Republicans. And still, I got the same percentage of the replacement side as did Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I never starred in Terminator 2.
But I have to point out and actually credit one of my callers, because I had a caller just a couple of minutes ago who said, don't go giving Larry Elder too much credit. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, you keep saying that he garnered 48+% of the vote, but you have to recognize that many sat out question number 2, unlike the Arnold election. Who was it? Bustamante, who I think was a serious candidate. In other words, many people who came out voted on 1 and went home. Had they voted on 2, presumably you would not have done so well. Look, I'm not taking away credit.
Let me just add something. You're right about Cruz Bustamante. He was lieutenant governor and a Democrat, and he ran against his boss, essentially. The Democrats were determined not to make the same mistake this time, so there was no big name Democrat in the race. But still, as to the percentage of those who cast votes for replacement, the percentage I got was identical to the percentage that Arnold Schwarzenegger got. No matter how you slice it, Michael, that's impressive. I only ran for 8 weeks. One of my big rivals, Republican rival, a 2-term mayor of San Diego, the second largest city in California, ran for a whole year. He only got 8% of the vote. I raised $20 million in 8 weeks. That is more than my Republican rivals combined, except for one who could self-fund. But I got outspent 10-1 by Gavin Newsom.
Right. Larry, I'm not taking anything. Look, I respect you. You are the man in the arena. You know, a lot of us sit around and we talk about it. You answered the bell, and I respect you for that. And I just want to say this on my own radio program. I really didn't intend it as a slight. I regret the way I introduced you on CNN. It was not on my part seeking to pin you that way.
Michael, I know
I should have done it. I should have done it differently. But here's the hard question that I want to ask you.
Michael, I know you well enough to know you weren't trying to pin me. My point is, you're an independent guy. You're a fair-minded guy. Imagine how the rest of the media treated me. They would routinely say this thing on purpose. I was asked over and over again, do I think the 2020 election was stolen? Would Stephen Miller have a position in my cabinet? What do I think about abortion? None of those issues had anything to do with why Californians were upset with Gavin Newsom. They were upset about the crime, about the homelessness, about the way he shut down the state, about the fact that people are leaving, poor fire management, we're running out of water, for crying out loud. Farmers right now are being water rationed. And we have a poor energy grid because of the forced reliance on so-called renewables like wind and solar. This is why people were upset with Gavin Newsom, but the left kept characterizing this in ways subtle and not so subtle as a Republican takeover. It was extremely unfair to me.
Here's the question that I most want to ask Larry Elder. Mm-hmm. Did you unintentionally cause Gavin Newsom to be retained by entering the race and with so many words associated with you? In the same way I have words associated with me. I've got 30 years of tape and a lot of books just like you. But did you provide him a foil where now it became a two-man race instead of a referendum on him? That's Michael, what I most wanted to ask you.
Michael, irrespective of who would have been his principal rival, he or she would have been characterized as a Republican takeover, because that's all he said over and over and over again. For example, I was chastised by many parts of the media for not participating in any of the debates. There were, I think, 4 Republican debates. I didn't go to either one of them because I felt we would end up getting involved in a circular firing squad. We ought to direct our attention to Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom only gave, I think, a couple of interviews during the time that I was involved in the race. He was never asked, why don't you debate Larry Elder? Never asked, let alone pressured to do so. But I was asked and pressured to get involved in Republican debates. And I can give you issue after issue after issue where that took place. No matter who his rival would have been, he or she would have been maligned as a Trump-supporting Republican, because that's all he had. He couldn't defend his record.
So you think if you had sat it out, it would have ended the same way, except the attention would have been on someone else among what would have been a 45 candidate field?
Well, if I had sat it out, Michael, the polls never would have tightened to the point where at least one point after I got into the race, it was showing a 50-50 tie on whether or not people wanted him to stay or didn't want him to stay. I energized. As I said, I raised more money in 8 weeks than all these guys did running for a whole year combined, with the exception of one who self-funded, and the one who self-funded ended up getting about 4 or 5% of the vote. I galvanized the race. I became a very important figure that at least got the Republicans excited about the recall. So I don't believe that my absence would have made anything any better. In fact, it would have been worse.
I am seeing you constantly on a commercial now. You're in a nice boat. I don't know where that was filmed, but it looks like something I'd like to hang out and do with Larry Elder. But now I'm getting the feeling that you're not going to spend time on the boat. You want a piece of this again. Am I right?
Well, I haven't decided yet. I went to Key West after the election to sort of decompress, and I was very impressed and surprised by how many people greeted me, bought me drinks. That's why I gained about 10 pounds. And I'm not sure whether or not a rematch would make any sense, given the electoral map that I just now outlined. I'm not sure whether or not it might make more of an impact if I helped Republican candidates take back the House and take back the Senate. So I'm thinking about doing that. I'm still not sure what I'm going to do. In the short run, I'm going to go back to radio. I have an obligation with Salem at least until April, and I'm going to fulfill my obligation. But I really haven't thought about my political future. Let me ask you, Michael, what do you think? What do you think I ought to do?
Well, I think the deck is stacked against you from a registration standpoint in California. I think that it's impossible in this climate to be elected statewide if you're a conservative. I think that's why, and I'm not saying it was a deliberate effort to end run the registration edge, but I think that the best shot that Larry Elder had to be elected governor was exactly the scenario that presented itself on September 14. But if you were to run for the U.S. Senate, or you were to run for governor of California, I just think that state is just too blue.
You know, I think you might very well be right. Another problem that I had in this race, I made a tactical decision before I got into the race, Michael, not to say one bad word about my Republican rivals. And it wasn't because I thought I was going to be the front runner. I was shocked as anybody else when I became the front runner and widened my lead after I was there. But I felt it was a mistake for us to take shots at each other. And unfortunately, my Republican rivals did not adhere to that strategy. Had they done so, and had the first words out of every Republican mouth been, well, I'm not here to talk about Larry Elder. I'm here to talk about Gavin Newsom's poor record on crime, violent crime up, the disproportionate percentage of the victims are Black and brown people. Schools were shut down. Before the school was shut down, 75% of Black boys could not read at state levels of proficiency. Almost half of all third graders could not, while his own kids enjoyed in-school private education, yada, blah, et cetera. That's what they should have said, should have done. And maybe had they been more disciplined, the race might have been a little closer. I don't know.
Larry, did you have any fun on the campaign trail? Is there a funny story, something along the way? I mean, you're a real serious guy, and I appreciate that, but I know what it's like to be out there on the campaign trail, and funny things happen all the time. You got any anecdote to share?
Well, sure. And by the way, I've got a great sense of humor. I'm not all that serious. I think the biggest anecdote was when a white woman in a gorilla mask threw an egg at me. And rather than the headlines being hate crime against Larry Elder, the headline in the LA Times was Elder involved in altercation in Venice. And there was a picture of me holding a campaign supporter, but it was frozen, so it looked as if I was slapping her. So if you saw the headline, Michael, and saw the picture, it would look as if the altercation was Elder attacking a female. Now, the only reason I mention this is because much of the media ignored it or made jokes about it. But I assure you, had that been a Kamala Harris campaigning or Barack Obama campaigning and some white woman in a gorilla mask threw an egg at him, they would have been calling that a hate crime. There would have been an international manhunt for her. One of the other stories, this may not be that funny, is Michael, you know me a very long time. We've never hung out really. We had dinner a couple of times, but we're not goombas, but I think you know me. And I've never, ever, ever suggested somebody should vote for me because I'm Black. And I never suggested somebody should vote against me because I'm Black. Nor did I make a big deal out of the fact that had I won, I would have been the first Black Republican elected governor in California. However, others made a big deal out about that. Now, in the New York Times, there was an article about me, very negative, not once mentioning my race, let alone that I would be the first Black governor of California. And Michael, I'm fine with that. I think it's about time we start evaluating people based upon their qualifications, not based upon their race, ethnicity, or gender. But the very same newspaper, the very same day, big article about, quote, the first female governor of New York, close quote. So the female governor of New York has a D at the end of her name. So her being first was relevant. I have an R at the end of my name, and I'm no longer Black. I mean, it's just, that's what I went through during the campaign.
I can't argue with that. I get it. You were going to, if you had broken that glass ceiling, it would have been significant, but that's not the way in which you were cast. Look, I knew as I watched from 3,000 miles away, all of the statements that you'd made in the past being parsed. I knew that scrutiny was being applied to you differently than it was the other 45 candidates, but you had to know that going into the race, right? Oh my God, they're going to mine all of the things I've said in front of an open mic previously.
Well, that's right. But I also feel that in my 30 years being on radio, I've been responsible. I've got 27,000 hours of radio. I published about 1,200 columns. I've written about 6 books. I've tweeted or posted stuff on Instagram and Facebook over 60,000 times. And that's all they had. They came up with some 21-year-old article I wrote about women knowing less than men know about certain political issues. I was quoting a study from the University of Pennsylvania Annenberg School of Journalism, and I quoted a female professor who said the reason women knew less than men did about certain political questions is because they get their primary news source from local news, quote, and watching local news makes you dumber, close quote. I didn't say it. I quoted a female professor saying it, and that was twisted into Larry Elder hates women. But I said to myself, this is all you guys have? I've been a public figure for over 40 years. I did 10 years of TV before I did radio, Michael, and that's all you guys have?
For the record, I'm not wearing a tie. Larry is. One of us is dressed as a governor and the other is dressed as a talk show host. I think that tells me where he intends to go next. Hey, Larry, thank you for coming.
I wanted to look good for you, Michael. Come on.
Listen, I want to
raise my game.
What's the deal on the boat? Is the boat yours?
Neither the boat nor the dog is mine.
Where was that filmed?
Lake Washington up in Seattle.
Nice. Looks great. Yeah. I thought maybe it was Tahoe.
Thank you. No.
Nice to catch up. Appreciate you coming back. Thank you, Larry.
My pleasure. And I do take Relief Factory. It does work. But thanks, Michael.